Hi there, today I'm going to show you how to make this triple wrap stretch bracelet. I'm going to be using these Miyuki 11-0 seed beads, and this is a bead mix called Succulent, available in my shop. If you're not a fan of the colors, I have many other bead mixes to choose from. I'm also going to use these silver beads to create kind of a focal point in the front of my bracelet. And I use one bead that has a larger hole, and the hole size is about 1.5 millimeters. And that's as small as you want to be able to hide the knots inside this bead. So you have to slide the knots into the bead, so you don't want to use a hole that's too small. You will also need some glue to secure your knots, and my favorite is this GS Hypo Cement glue. You'll need a pair of scissors and a ruler. You also can't forget the stretch cord. So the stretch cord I use is called Stretch Magic, and I use the 0.7 millimeters. So these Miyuki seed beads have a hole size of about 0.8 millimeter. So you need a cord that's thin enough to fit through the hole easily, but you don't want it to be too thin. So I don't recommend using 0.5 millimeter stretch cord because I think it breaks too easily. Now, before you start making your bracelet, you need to know how long to make it, and that depends on your actual wrist size. So in my case, my actual wrist size is 5.75 inches. Now, if I made a bracelet that was 5.75 inches, it would probably be too snug. So I need to add a little excess. So with this size bead specifically, these 11-0s, these small 2 millimeter beads, I only add about 1/4 inch, and that makes it so that when I put my bracelet on, it has a little bit of room, but it doesn't move around too much. So if I was making a single strand bracelet, I would make it 6 inches. Now, if I was making double, I would multiply that by 2, which would give me 12 inches. And if I was making a triple wrap, which I am today, I would multiply that by 3. And that would give me 18 inches. So I need to cut a cord that's at least 18 inches, but I want to cut a little extra so that I have some room at the ends to tie my knots. So I recommend adding about 6 to 10 inches to the length of your cord. So in my case, I need to cut a cord that's about 24 to 28 inches. Once I cut my cord, I want to pre-stretch it. So I kind of grab it from each end and pull. And pre-stretching your cord is going to help your bracelet or prevent your bracelet from stretching out or sagging over time. I always start with my large hole bead, so I'm going to string that first. And then you're going to want to put something on the end to prevent the beads from falling off the end as you're stringing them on the other end. So I'm using here what's called a bead stopper. But if you don't have a bead stopper, you can use a piece of tape, a paper clip, a small binder clip, anything that will stop the beads from sliding off of the end. Now, I want to create 1-inch focal sections of my silver beads. And so since I need to make each wrap 6 inches, that means I'm going to do 1 inch of my silver beads plus 5 inches of my bead mix. So I'm going to alternate the two. However, since I want to put my knots in the back, I'm going to actually start with 2.5 inches of my bead mix, followed by 1 inch of my silver beads and 5 inches of my bead mix, 1 inch of my silver beads, 5 inches of my bead mix, 1 inch of my silver beads, and then I'm going to end with 2.5 inches of my bead mix. And that's going to align with the other 2.5 inches that I started with to give me the full 5 inches. The most time-consuming part is going to be stringing the beads, and so I encourage you to think of that as a meditative process. And I'm going to show you how I do it, and then I'm going to skip ahead to finishing the bracelet. So instead of picking up the beads and stringing them with your fingers like this, which you can definitely do, I like to just take my cord and kind of use it like a needle and just skewer the beads like so. Now, this really works best if you use something like a bead mat where you spread out your beads and the beads don't stick or roll around. So then it's much easier to get them up this way. Now when I'm using a bead mix, I usually add the beads randomly, so no particular order. That's kind of how I create the bead mixes, and I really like that look. But you can definitely create a pattern as well. So that's totally up to you. So you're basically just going to keep stringing your beads like this, alternating between the bead mix and your focal beads until you reach the length of your bracelet. So in my case, until I reach 18 inches. Here I have all the beads strung. Okay, so you're going to see I started with my large hole bead, and I did 2.5 inches of my bead mix, 1 inch of my silver beads, 5 inches of my bead mix, and did another 1 inch of my silver beads, 5 inches of bead mix, 1 inch of silver beads, and I finished with 2.5 inches of the bead mix. So you'll see when I pull these together here, which these are the two ends that'll be tied together, I have 2.5 inches of bead mix, I have my large hole bead, and 2.5 inches of bead mix. So when I add these two together, that gives me the full 5 inches for that section of bead mix. So now I'm going to tie my knots, and to do so I'm going to take my left cord and I'm going to wrap it around the right cord once and then twice. So looks like that. So this is the start of a surgeon's knot here. And then I'm going to take the left cord, wrap it around the right cord once, and I'm going to pull that down. So you can see on the bottom I've wrapped it twice, and on the top it's wrapped once. So then I'm going to pull that really, really, really tight. You can see I'm giving a really good tug. Okay. All right. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to create one more overhand knot. So to do that, I'm just going to create a simple overhand knot, left over right, one time, and I'm going to pull. Okay, and there's my knot, you can see, and it's nice and secure, it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. Okay. Now I'm going to cut the excess thread. So I leave about 1 to 2 millimeters. Okay. There we go. And now I'm going to glue my knots. Give a nice dab of glue. And now I want to slide the knots into this larger hole bead. So what I do is I hold this bead with these two fingers here, and I gently pull the knots into the larger hole bead. And that's it. So to put the bracelet on, you simply wrap it around your wrist 3 times. And you can see that I have my focal beads here in the front, and we have the knots in the back. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and please let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Thank you.